Imagine this. You're drowning in credit card debt. Every card is maxed out. Payments are overdue. Instead of tightening your budget or working more hours, you open a new credit line to pay off the old ones. Then you pull another trick. You lend money to yourself. You write an IOU on one piece of paper, then hand yourself another piece of paper that says you've been repaid. On the surface, the debt disappears. In reality, you've solved nothing. Sounds insane, right? The kind of circular logic that would land any of us in bankruptcy court within months. And yet, this is exactly how the most powerful nation on earth finances itself. The United States government has turned this apparent madness into the beating heart of the global economy. It issues bonds, promises to repay debt with interest, and then, through its own central bank, it buys those same promises with money created out of thin air. A country lending to itself, paying itself with money it doesn't really have. On the surface, it looks like magic. In practice, it's the greatest financial trick in history. And it raises one terrifying question. How long can the trick last before the illusion shatters?
Let's strip the complexity down to the basics. A bond is nothing more than an IOU. When the U.S. Treasury issues one, it's saying, lend me money now and I'll pay you back later, plus interest. It's debt dressed up in formal clothes. For centuries, U.S. bonds have been considered the safest investment on earth. They're backed by the full faith and credit of the United States, words that for investors have been as good as gold. This faith allowed America to do something remarkable, spend more than it collected in taxes, year after year, confident that investors would always line up to finance the difference. But this didn't begin in the modern era. The story starts with a young nation, staggering out of the Revolutionary War, drowning in unpaid bills. Soldiers hadn't been fully compensated, suppliers were owed fortunes, and foreign allies, like France, had grown impatient waiting for repayment. Enter Alexander Hamilton, the nation's first Treasury Secretary. He had a radical idea. Instead of defaulting or begging for forgiveness, the United States would honor its debts. How? By issuing new bonds to pay the old ones. It was a gamble, but it worked. By proving it would pay, the U.S. earned the trust of investors. That trust became the oxygen America needed to survive and grow. From that moment forward, borrowing was not a temporary solution, it was a permanent feature of the Republic. Debt and the bonds that represented it became the lifeblood of the American financial system.
Fast forward to the year 1913. Until this point, the American banking system was volatile, prone to panic and collapse. When fear struck, banks toppled like dominoes. The government needed a stabilizer, something to prevent financial chaos from destroying the nation's economy. So, the Federal Reserve was born. The Fed's official purpose was to act as a lender of last resort, but soon it became much more, a partner in the government's debt machine. When World War II erupted, the Treasury needed unimaginable sums to finance the war effort. The Fed stepped up. It agreed to buy government bonds whenever necessary, ensuring demand never dried up. This was a breakthrough. It meant America had essentially discovered a way to guarantee financing for anything: war, infrastructure, social programs, simply by having its own central bank create money and use it to buy bonds. In plain language, the government could borrow endlessly, and the Fed could always be counted on to fund the borrowing. But the true revolution came in 1971. Up to that point, the U.S. dollar was tied to gold. In theory, foreign governments could take their dollars and exchange them for gold bars in American vaults. This tether kept the illusion in check. There was a physical limit to how many dollars the U.S. could print. But the Vietnam War, coupled with massive domestic spending programs, ballooned America's debt. Other nations began doubting whether the U.S. could truly back every dollar with gold. So President Richard Nixon did the unthinkable. He severed the dollar's tie to gold. Overnight, the currency was no longer backed by anything tangible. From then on, the dollar's value rested solely on faith. Faith that America would keep its promises and that investors would keep buying its bonds. This was the moment the trick went global. The system became pure paper, pure confidence, pure illusion. Here's the cycle in modern form. Step 1. The U.S. government spends more than it collects in taxes. The shortfall must be financed. Step 2. The Treasury issues bonds to cover the deficit. These are sold at auction.
Buyers include foreign governments, pension funds, insurance companies, banks, and investment funds. They buy treasuries because they're still seen as the safest bet in the world. Step 3. But when demand isn't strong enough, the Federal Reserve enters the stage. Unlike other buyers, the Fed doesn't need to save or collect money. It simply creates money digitally by typing numbers on a balance sheet and uses that new money to buy treasuries. That's the sleight of hand. The government borrows, the Fed creates, the bonds are bought. The circle is complete. From the outside, it looks like America is financing itself with invisible money. And in a sense, it is. This isn't theory. It's been deployed aggressively in times of crisis. During the 2008 financial meltdown, the Federal Reserve launched something called quantitative easing. It bought trillions of dollars worth of treasuries and mortgage securities. The goal was to stabilize banks, prop up markets, and keep the system from collapse. Then came the pandemic. Once again, the Fed unleashed a torrent of digital money, buying even more bonds to finance stimulus programs and emergency spending. That's how stimulus checks ended up in your mailbox. That's how Wall Street bailouts were funded. That's how entire industries were kept afloat. Not through taxes, not through savings, but through the bond trick. Who benefits from this cycle? Politicians win because they can spend freely without raising taxes. Banks and investors win because the Fed's money props up asset prices. Even foreign governments benefit, at least for now, because U.S. Treasuries remain the cornerstone of global finance. But the losers? Ordinary people. Every time the Fed creates new money to buy bonds, the value of existing money erodes. Groceries cost more, rent rises, savings buy less. This hidden tax is called inflation, and you pay it every day. Today, U.S. debt has soared past $30 trillion, and the number only grows. Foreign governments once eagerly bought treasuries, but that enthusiasm is fading. China and Japan, the two largest holders, have been trimming their positions. The more foreign demand shrinks, the more America must rely on its own central bank. That means more money creation, more inflation pressure, and more fragility if trust falters. But America still has one enormous advantage. The dollar is the world's reserve currency. Oil is priced in dollars. Global trade is settled in dollars. Central banks worldwide hold treasuries as their safest reserve asset. This gives the U.S. a financial empire unlike any in history, not built on gold or land, but on trust in American IOUs. Yet cracks are appearing. Nations in the BRICS bloc are exploring alternatives. Central banks are buying gold at the fastest pace in decades. Whispers of de-dollarization are growing louder. None of this is new. Empires have always played the debt game. Britain financed its navy and colonies with bonds until the pound collapsed after World War II. France in the 18th century used bond tricks to finance wars until the system imploded in a revolution. Weimar Germany in the 1920s printed money to cover debts until hyperinflation wiped out savings overnight. History tells us debt can feel power, but trust always runs out. The bill always comes due. This isn't some abstract accounting game played in Washington. It touches every corner of your life. Your savings account, your grocery bill, your mortgage, your retirement. Every time new money is conjured to buy bonds, the value of your dollars shrinks. Every paycheck you earn buys less. Inflation silently transfers wealth from ordinary citizens to elites who hold assets that rise with inflation. It is theft, hidden in plain sight. The illusion works only as long as people believe the treasuries are safe, believe that the dollar will hold, believe that inflation won't spiral out of control. But if foreign investors walk away, if confidence in the dollar cracks, the entire system could shake. The U.S. would be forced to finance itself almost entirely at home. That means more reliance on the Fed, more inflation, and more strain on ordinary Americans. It's the fate of every empire that borrowed too heavily. The illusion collapses, and reality comes crashing in. So what do we take from this? That true financial literacy means piercing the illusion, recognizing that government debt is never free, that inflation is not an accident, but a hidden tax, and that trust, fragile, invisible trust, is the only thing keeping the system from collapse. It means asking yourself hard questions. If inflation rises, will your savings survive? If faith in U.S. Treasuries fades, what happens to your retirement, your mortgage, your paycheck? If the illusion breaks, who will pay the price?
Because history gives us the answer. Not Washington, not Wall Street. It's always ordinary people. People like you. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Britain built an empire on bonds until trust collapsed. France financed wars and extravagance with IOUs until the revolution swept it away. And now America plays the same game, borrowing endlessly, buying its own debt, keeping the illusion alive. But illusions never last forever. The only question is when. If this story made you question the system, if it opened your eyes to how money and power truly work, then don't let it stop here. Subscribe now, and I'll show you more hidden patterns in history, the financial tricks, the empires, the illusions, and most importantly, the lessons you can use before the next collapse arrives. Because when the bill finally comes due, knowledge won't just be power, it might be survival.